Hey guys, sorry the last video ended abruptly. I lost track of my timer at the bottom, but I'll continue with the Nicol Bolas video here in part 2 for the EDH Deck Tech. But it ended on Starstorm. I was just talking about Starstorm being an instant board wipe. It's great to go along with our theme of creature lists, and like I said, we're going to need instant answers. And then of course it's got an alternate ability, which is cycling for 3. We can go ahead and do that, and it draws us a card. So continuing on with the board control. We have Life's Finale, of course, which is another great board wipe from the newer sets. 6 cost, 2 black, 4 colorless. Let's just destroy all creatures, and then we can search target opponent's library for up to 3, and then dump them into their graveyard. That's good, like I said, it's a good board wipe. Of course, we do run the most traditional board wipe for black, which is Damnation. Great, 4 cost, 2 black, 2 colorless. Lets us destroy all creatures, and they cannot be regenerated. So it's really good, especially in this deck, considering we need to keep creatures off the board. And then this one's really good. Normally this is funny, like I said, if there's a lot of creatures on the board, it's Decree of Pain. It's going to be 8 cost. It's a little bit pricier there, but it lets us draw a card for each creature that was destroyed. And then it also has a cycling ability, which is going to give each creature -2, -2. So it's funny there with Avenger of Zendikar. If you want to cycle this in during its phases and keep those creatures dead, or you can just wait till it resolves and then play this and laugh as you draw a bajillion cards. It's really funny too with Army of the Damned. I've got to use it on both of them. So Decree of Pain's awesome. Moving on then with the deck, I'm going to move now into the artifacts that go along to help us really achieve what we need to do and lock down the board. This one right here, of course, is Phyrexian Altar. It's your 3 cost. It's got the ability to sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any mana color to your mana pool. We're not playing any creatures in this deck, but this card is awesome for disruption. It lets us take any of our other opponent's creatures later on that I was showing earlier on with like the Reigns of Power. You're going to be able to take those and you're going to be able to sack them. So not only do you get your opponent's creatures for a turn, or do you keep them from attacking you, you can just then sack them with this card, and you get some mana, which is always an additional plus. But it's really good in here, and let's move on to the next one. Of course, we have a Meek Stone, which is awesome. It's a turn 1 play for us potentially. Lets us play a Meek Stone here, and each creature with power 3 or greater does not get to untap during their controller's untap step. So it keeps those 3 or higher guys just sitting there in tap zone, and they can't do anything. Then, of course, you've got O Stone, which is really great in this. It's a good board reset, especially if we have any opponents that get too out of control and we need to just reset the board. We can also put fate counters on things like our enchantments that we want to keep on the board, and then just blow everything else up and laugh as your opponents have to reset and you already got a bunch of creature hate on the field. So O Stone's awesome. Of course, Fencer's Journal is really amazing. It gains us life in here, which is pretty important too, considering we will probably take some damage throughout the game. And since we run no creatures to block for us, we're always going to have to make sure our life total is high. And this deck draws a lot of cards. So you have Vencer's Journal. If you want to combine, like I said, this with the Necropotence that I put in there, that's always funny because you're going to end up with paying life for a lot of cards. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you'll just gain all that life back. So Vencer's Journal is awesome. Of course, we have our Darksteel Ingot. Got to have an indestructible source of mana. Also helps here, kind of mana fixing too with the colors that we've got. Of course, Soul Ring, your 1 cost artifact that can be tutored out with the Tezzeret. Your Divining Top, which gives us a little bit more control and filtering. Also can give us a couple answers if we need to just scry and then go ahead and bounce it to get the card on top of our deck. Elixir is great. It's really good because it lets you actually recur this deck. It can be pulled out relatively easily too with Tezzeret. Like I said, 1 cost, pay 2, we sack it, gain 5 life, and it shuffles back into our deck along with the rest of our graveyard. So this card is very, very good. It's very key to a lot of the recursion that we're going to keep on doing. Next, I'm going to move into your tutor package. This is something like it really helps fitting out a 100-card deck, and if you need to get certain things, you have access to those. You're going to have right here Mystical Tutor, which is your 1 cost blue. We search our library for any instant interrupt mana source or sorcery card, and we put it on top of our deck. So this card's very good for searching out some of our bigger spells, or even a board wipe if we need to get the board back to level. We'll use that. Of course, this card is awesome. I actually was kind of turned off by its mana cost of 4 and 1 black originally, lets us search for our library for any card we want and put it into our hand. But then it's got the flashback cost for 7 and 1 black. So we actually are going to get to draw 3 cards out of this card entirely. And usually with Cabal Coffers and Urborg, that's not too much of an issue. And it let us search up 2 immediate answers for threats to the board state. And it's really turned out nicely in this deck. Of course, you have your Demo Tutor, 1 black, 1 colorless. Search our deck for any card we want, put it into our hands. Demonic Tutor is always going to be a permanent EDH staple for black players, along with your Vampiric Tutor. You pay 2 life. It's instant, by the way. You lets you search your library for any card, shuffle your library, and then put that card on top of it. So that card's awesome. Now I'm going to move into some more of the actual other components of the decks. You're going to get right here some of your Thievery, because we're playing blue, and we're going to want to take advantage of that. First one, though, is not a blue card. It's actually a red card. This is Insurrection. It can also be a win con, depending, like I said, on how crazy the board gets. But, of course, it's your 5 colorless and your 3 red. It lets us take control of all creatures until end of turn, and they gain haste. So, between your opponents, if they have enough to OTK somebody, you can just take control, wipe out a player. Or you can take control of them all with this, and then you can use the Phyrexian Altar from earlier and just sack them all and laugh as you get retarded amounts of mana, and you give your opponents back nothing. Then you have Bribery, which of course is an awesome blue card. Lets us search our opponent's deck for any creature card and put that card into play. I actually don't use this card as often as I do in most of my blue decks. In this deck, just because this one has so much creature hate, that it really isn't beneficial for me to take a creature usually at the board. But there are a few times I've used it, to ramp with a Primeval Titan or something like that from one of my opponents. So it can come in handy, but it's in here just in case we need it. Your Memory Plunder, which is an awesome blue-black hybrid mana 4-cost instant. It lets us go ahead and take any instant or sorcery card in an opponent's graveyard and play them for free without paying their mana cost. It's really good, especially for playing some of the board wipes that might get put in graveyards from your opponents. It lets you have double the board wipes available to you to go ahead and keep the creatures off the board. Of course, going with the theme of Nicol Bolas and taking our opponent's stuff, we have Slave of Bolas. Gives us control of a creature. It gets haste until end of turn, and then at the end of the turn, we get to sacrifice it. So they play a big fat Eldrazi. We're just like, oh, well, we'll go ahead and take that Ulamog or Kozilek and swing at him, so you have to annihilate, and then we'll sack him. So Slave of Bolas is awesome. And then, of course, you have Blatant Thievery, which is your 3 blue, 4 colorless. For each opponent at the table, we get to gain control of a permanent they control, and then it's ours for good. So that card's awesome. And then the last one here, this card is just silly. Knowledge Exploitation. It's a card from the, looks like it, Lorwyn block. Yeah. It lets us search our opponent's library for any instant or sorcery cards they may have and play them without paying their mana cost. It does have a prowl cost, but we don't get to use that because we have no rogues in our deck. We have no creatures, pretty much. But we have the 5 mana and usually the 2 blue available, so we'll just go ahead and search their library for any instant or sorcery card we may feel that will be relevant or useful to us. So it's really good in this deck. That pretty much covers the Thievery part. I'm going to go ahead and move right now into the last 2 components, which is your draws and then your counters. Because since we're playing a creatureless control build, of course we're going to want to draw a lot of cards to go ahead and get a lot of answers to what the board state's going to be like, and then we're going to want to have a lot of counters to back up some of the shenanigans we do with our enchantments. Right here, this to me is one of your best draw spells in pretty much multiplayer formats. It's Trade Secrets. It's also a very great political card. 2 blue, 1 colorless. It's pretty much pay 3 and draw 4 at the worst. And you and a target opponent, go ahead, you pick whoever the opponent is. They get to draw 2 cards, and then you draw up to 4 cards. And you and that opponent can repeat this process as many times as they choose. So they decide that they want to load up their hand, well, you're going to be loading up a lot more cards, because for every 2, you're drawing 4. So that card's great. I use it to my advantage all the time, and I usually pick the guy, that's hurting with his hand. Hey, buddy, help me out. He draws a couple cards, I draw a lot more. So the card's awesome. Of course, your black draw or discard draw spell, which is Siphon Mind. Each of your opponents discards a card, and then you draw a card for each card discarded. It's only 3 colorless and a black. It's pretty good. I like the card. Usually draws us a couple, 2 to 3 cards, depending on how big the table is. I've played at tables of 5, where I just draw a lot of cards. So, Promise of Power is really good. It's got an entwine cost where you can draw 5 cards and then lose 5 life, and then also put a demon into play that's got power and toughness equal to the number of cards in hand. It costs 3 black and 2 colorless, and if you choose to entwine it, it costs 9. Normally we just pay the 5 life and draw 5 cards, unless you're feeling really adventurous and you want to put a demon into play. I normally don't do it because this deck, like I said, isn't really friendly towards creatures, so it's your prerogative, but it's great to get us there. It's great to draw 5 cards for the cost of 5 life. Whoop-de-doo. Of course, the card Deep Analysis is awesome. It's 3 colors, 1 blue. Lets us draw, well, target player draws 2 cards. So if we wanted to help somebody else out, which I don't know why we could have them draw 2 cards. But normally you're drawing 2 cards. You've got a flashback cost of it too, which is a blue and a colorless, pay 3 life, and you can also flash it back from your graveyard to draw 2 cards. So it's really good for getting us there sometimes when we need a card draw, especially if it's in your graveyard. Of course, I got the theme here with Nicol Bolas on the front of it, so it's cool. It adds flavor to the deck, I guess. This card right here, these are some of your disruptions I'm going to get into now. That was all the draw. Your disrupting cards, head games. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but this card is just funny. I put it in here for mostly the lulz, but also to add a little bit of politicalness to our deck and try to gain some favor at the table with some people. Head games. It's 3 colorless, 2 black. Lets us pick an opponent, then we can take that opponent's hand, put it in their library, and then take whatever their hand size was. So say they had 5 cards, we can put 5 cards from their deck into their hands. It lets us change out our opponent's hand. I've done this a lot, where I take and give the opponents a lot of board wipe spells just to kind of help ourselves, because obviously, like I said, we don't want creatures on the board. And I've also had a person that I gave the Tellerman performance to, just to see if they would actually decide to use it on us, which they did, and then they were in for a Phage surprise. So honestly, it's a very political card. It's very fun to play EDH, and I always get laughs from everyone whenever they see head games being played. So you can run it yourself. It's pretty funny. Another good card in here is Ill-Gotten Gains. This card goes very, very well with Bojuka Bog, where we can exile everyone else's graveyard. But essentially, Ill-Gotten Gains, 2 colorless, 2 black. We remove it from the game, and we have everyone discard their hand, including ourselves. But everyone gets to then pick 3 cards from their graveyards and put them into their hands. So as you pick your hand, you get 3 cards back. This card right here is great for wiping out your opponent's hands, like I said, and especially if you cleared out their graveyard. And then usually we can find 3 things to get back and get ourselves going back into the game fairly quickly. And a lot of times it leaves them at a huge disadvantage. So Ill-Gotten Gains is awesome. Another good disruptive spell, of course, is Wild Ricochet. It's the 2 red, 2 colorless. We can choose any spells that your opponent plays that has to be instant or sorcery, and then we can copy it, and then we choose new targets for the copy, and then we can copy that copy. So we get to play something twice, and we also get to redirect it. So it's really cool. This card is coming in handy a lot of times. Of course, you have Croesus Charm, which is a very versatile card. It basically gives you bounce a target permanent. You can go ahead and use a Doomblade effect, kill a non-black creature, or you can use it to destroy an artifact. So it's a good multi-purpose card depending on the board state, and I've really utilized it a lot. I'll normally get one of those 3 abilities out of it, so that's why we run it. Then of course you've got your Capsize, your blue bounce permanent with the buyback of 3, so altogether you're paying 6 for it, but it's very good, especially like end of turn or something. You're going to keep a pesky permanent or creature off the board. You can go ahead and use Capsize, and it's reusable. And then here we have your Cruel Ultimatum. We're playing Grixis colors, of course, the blue, black, and red, and Nicol Bolas. So of course we want to be flavorful and run this silly card. Cruel Ultimatum. Our opponent, well, target opponent, is going to go ahead and sack a creature, discard 3 cards, and then lose 5 life. And then just to rub it in, we're going to pick a creature from our graveyard if we have one. Normally we don't, because we don't run any creatures except for Phage. And then we draw 3 cards and then gain 5 life. Really good card. Pretty mana intensive, but it's all good. Here's our counter spell that we're gonna run. We're gonna run a Force of Will, of course. Like I said, you're gonna be tapping out a lot for some of the big game-ending spells, and your blue opponents are gonna try to sit there and wait till you do that. So we have a Force of Will here to back it up. We can go ahead and pay 1 life and remove a blue card we have from the game, and we play this for free. So of course your Force of Will is awesome. Then we have your Cryptic Command, which is pretty costly, but it's really great. It's got 4 nodes. They're not all shown here. This is the full art, but they counter target spell. draws you a card, it bounces a permanent, or it taps down all target opponent creatures. So it's really good in that regard too. We can kind of multi-purpose it depending on the situation, but essentially in here is a counter. Then of course we've got your Rewind, which is another 4 cost, but it's 2 blue, 2 colorless. Lets us counter a spell, and then we can tap up to 4 lands. That comes really in handy too with the Cabal Coffers that you just tapped. And if you get to counter something, you do that and you untap the Cabal Coffers, then you have a lot more mana floating in your mana pool once you have the Urborg out as well. So Rewind's really good. Of course we have our Dissipate, which